13 years old, soaking wet, standing in front of a motorcycle club at dawn. Most kids her age are worried about homework. Melina? She's running from a predator the law can't seem to stop. One question, her last chance to vanish before he finds her again. The sun wasn't fully up yet when Melina pushed through the chain-link gate of the Black Hollow Riders lot. Her sneakers made wet, squelching sounds with every step. She'd cut through Miller's Creek to avoid the main roads, wading through water that came up to her shins. The black hoodie clung to her shoulders, heavy with moisture and the weight of everything she was carrying that couldn't fit in a backpack. Inside the clubhouse, Connor was the first to notice her through the window. He'd been up since 4, couldn't sleep, nursing coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He watched this kid because that's what she was, just a kid, standing in the gravel lot like she'd materialized out of the fog itself. She didn't look lost. Her posture held the kind of resolve that comes from running out of choices. "We got company," Connor called back into the main room. Knox emerged from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder, followed by Eliza who'd stayed over after a double shift at the hospital. They stepped outside together, and that's when they saw her up close. Bruises on her wrists, barely visible under the sleeves she kept tugging down. Dark circles under her eyes that spoke of nights without sleep. Her expression carried something beyond fear or tears, absolute certainty about what she needed to say. "Can you take me somewhere he doesn't know?" The words came out steady, practiced, like she'd been rehearsing them for miles. Eliza moved first. She had that instinct honed from years of seeing trauma walk through emergency room doors. She didn't bombard Melina with questions, didn't demand explanations. She just touched the girl's shoulder gently and said, "Come inside. You're freezing." The clubhouse was warm, smelling of coffee and motor oil and old leather. Eliza wrapped a blanket around Melina's shoulders and guided her to a worn couch near the wood stove. Knox disappeared and returned with hot chocolate, the good kind with real marshmallows floating on top. Melina held the mug but didn't drink, just let the heat seep into her palms. "Who's he?" Knox asked, settling into a chair across from her. His voice was surprisingly gentle for a man covered in tattoos and scars. Melina stared into the mug. "My mom's ex-boyfriend, Derek." The story came out in pieces, fragments she'd been holding in her chest for months. Her mother, Mary, had met Derek at a friend's barbecue last summer. It seemed normal at first. Bought groceries, fixed things around the apartment, made Mary laugh. But normal didn't last. The yelling started within weeks. Then the holes punched in walls. Then the night Mary showed up at Melina's school with a split lip and hollow excuses. Mary had tried to leave. She really had. But Derek had this way of finding her, of making promises, of convincing her that this time would be different. And Mary, still battling her own demons, 3 years of cycling through rehab and relapse, kept believing him. Until the night Derek's anger shifted. Until he looked at Melina the wrong way. Until Mary realized her daughter wasn't safe anymore. "Mom checked herself back into treatment 6 months ago," Melina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Long-term this time, 3 hours away. She thought if we were apart, if she got clean and he couldn't find me, we'd both be safe. She put me in emergency foster care with the Hendersons. They're nice people. They tried." Eliza leaned forward. "What happened 2 nights ago?" Melina's grip tightened on the mug. "I woke up and he was standing at the foot of my bed, just standing there watching me. I screamed. Mr. Henderson came running. Derek jumped out the window and was gone before anyone could grab him. Police showed up 20 minutes later, took a report, said they'd increase patrols." She finally looked up, meeting Eliza's eyes. "But he's done this before. He always gets away. And I'm tired of waiting for him to come back." Connor, who'd been standing silently by the door, spoke up. "How'd you know to come here?" "I didn't really. I've seen you guys around town. At the diner, at the gas station. People talk about the riders like you're dangerous, but I've also heard stories. About the family you helped last winter when their house burned down. About the kid you pulled out of that bad situation over on 7th Street. I figured if anyone would understand, it'd be you." Knox exchanged a look with Eliza. She nodded almost imperceptibly. All right, Knox said, standing up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish that chocolate and get some rest. We're going to make some calls. And Melina, he waited until she met his eyes. You're safe here. Whatever happens next, we've got you. Melina's shoulders dropped an inch, the tension she'd carried for miles finally loosening its grip. Not relaxed, but something close to relief flickered across her face. Eliza pulled out her phone and stepped into the hallway. Within minutes, the clubhouse came alive with purpose. Connor stepped outside to smoke, watching the empty road. He'd been that kid once. Different circumstances, same desperation. The memory tasted like rust in his mouth. By 9 a.m., the Black Hollow Riders Clubhouse had transformed into something between a command center and a sanctuary. Ferris arrived first, still in his work boots from the construction site, bringing with him a duffel bag full of paper maps, the kind truck drivers used before GPS made everything traceable. He spread them across the scarred wooden table in the main room, marking routes with a red pen. Digital leaves footprints, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Paper burns clean. Knox was already on his second round of phone calls, pacing near the window with his cell pressed to his ear. He'd reached out to Matt, an old army buddy who now ran a security consulting firm out of Tennessee. Then came a call to Diane, who worked victim services in the next county over. Each conversation was brief, coded, efficient. Questions stayed practical. What did Knox need, when, and where? Melina had finally fallen asleep on the couch, the blanket pulled up to her chin. Eliza watched the girl's breathing, steady, deep, the kind that only comes after your body finally stops running on pure adrenaline. Connor returned from his morning ride, helmet under his arm. No unfamiliar vehicles in a 3-mile radius. Checked the usual spots, rest stops, that abandoned motel on Route 9. Nothing. Good, Knox said, ending his latest call. But we can't assume he's not watching. Guy like this, he's patient. Obsessive. Ferris tapped the map. We need to know more about him. Patterns. Connections. How he keeps slipping through. That's when Eliza spoke up. I've been thinking about that. Melina mentioned the police always show up late. And 2 nights ago, Derek was in and out before they arrived. Like he knew exactly how much time he had. Knox's jaw tightened. You thinking what I'm thinking? Someone's feeding him information. Or at least looking the other way. The room went silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, Ferris pulled out his phone. I know a guy, Rafe, used to ride with us before he got his PI license. If anyone can dig up dirt without raising flags, it's him. While Ferris made the call, Knox sat down next to the maps and started sketching out routes with Eliza. We need 3 exit strategies. 1 real, 2 decoys. Split their attention if anyone's tracking. East takes us toward the interstate. Eliza traced a line with her finger. High traffic, easy to blend in, but also cameras everywhere. North goes through farmland, Connor added. Sparse, quiet, but nowhere to hide if someone catches up. West, Ferris said, rejoining them after hanging up. Claire's ranch, my cousin. She's 2 states over, runs a horse rescue in the middle of nowhere. No neighbors for miles. No one asks questions out there. Knox nodded. West is the real route. East and north are theater. At 11, Melina stirred awake. She sat up slowly, disoriented, then remembered where she was. Eliza brought her toast and orange juice. Simple, easy on a nervous stomach. How are you feeling? Eliza asked. Like I slept for the first time in weeks. Melina picked at the toast. What happens now? Eliza pulled up a chair. Now we need to ask you some hard questions. Things that might help us understand how Derek keeps finding you. Melina nodded, bracing herself. Does Derek have friends in law enforcement? Anyone who might give him information? I don't know about friends, but... Melina hesitated. Mom mentioned once that his cousin works as a dispatcher. County over from here, I think. She said it bothered her. How Derek always seemed to know when she'd called the police. Knox's jaw clenched. a muscle twitching near his temple. The pieces clicked into place. What about your mom? Eliza continued gently. Does she know you're here? Melina shook her head. She's in treatment. They only allow supervised calls once a week. Our next one isn't until Thursday. Eliza glanced at Knox, then back at Melina. We might need to contact her facility. Let them know what's happening. Your mom deserves to know you're safe, and we need to make sure Derek can't use her to find you. Tears welled up in Melina's eyes, the first real emotion breaking through her carefully maintained composure. She's trying so hard. 90 days sober. If something happens to me because of him, nothing's going to happen to you, Eliza said firmly. But your mom needs to be in the loop. Would you be okay with a supervised video call? Just so she can see you're all right? Melina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Yeah, okay. An hour later, Eliza had arranged it through the treatment facility's counselor. They set up a laptop on the kitchen table, and when Mary's face appeared on screen, the resemblance was striking. Same dark eyes, same sharp cheekbones, though Mary looked older than her 34 years. Baby, Mary whispered, her voice cracking. Oh God. Baby, are you hurt? I'm okay, Mom. I'm safe. I heard what happened. They told me this morning. I wanted to leave, wanted to come get you, but they said. Mary pressed her hand to her mouth, composing herself. They said the best thing I can do is finish this program. Be strong for when you need me. You are being strong, Mom. 90 days. That's amazing. Mary's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry for bringing him into our lives, for not protecting you, for, Mom, stop. Melina's voice was steady now. Just get better. That's all I need. Get better and stay better. The conversation drifted to safer ground. Mary described the cafe where she hoped to work, asked about the horses Melina would meet, promised to send letters every week, a promise to see each other when it was truly safe. When they finally said goodbye, both of them were crying, but these tears felt different, like rain after a drought instead of a flood. After the call ended, Rafe's name lit up Ferris's phone. Talk to me, Ferris answered. Whatever Rafe said made Ferris's expression darken. He listened, asked a few questions, then hung up. Derek's violating probation, Ferris announced to the room. Rafe found evidence of unauthorized firearms, crossing state lines without permission, contact with known felons. Better yet, his ex-wife is willing to testify now. She's been documenting everything for 2 years, just waiting for someone to take her seriously. Knox stood up. Then we've got leverage. Real leverage. Rafe's taking it to a DA he trusts. Someone who won't tip off Derek's dispatcher cousin. If this works, Derek's looking at serious time. Melina listened from the doorway, hardly daring to hope. How long? She asked quietly. Ferris met her eyes. Could be days. Could be weeks. But Melina? This time he won't slip through. Outside, Connor was already preparing his bike for the first decoy run. Inside, Knox was triple-checking the supplies they'd need for the rail journey west. And Eliza was making one more call, to Claire, letting her know a girl who needed sanctuary was coming home. Dawn broke cold and clear on the third day. Inside the clubhouse, everyone moved with quiet efficiency. No wasted words, no hesitation. Melina stood by the window, watching the sky shift from deep purple to pale orange, her new backpack at her feet. Knox had replaced everything inside. Fresh clothes that actually fit, a first aid kit, a prepaid phone with only 3 numbers programmed in, and cash in a waterproof pouch. Connor left first, right at sunrise. A young woman named Jess, someone from the club's extended network, rode behind him wearing Melina's old black hoodie, hood pulled up, posture deliberately similar. They headed east toward the interstate, making sure to stop at the Shell station off exit 47, where the cameras would catch them. Connor even went inside for coffee, giving the security footage a clear shot of his passenger waiting by the bike. 30 minutes later, Knox pulled out in his pickup truck heading north. He'd stuffed a baseball cap with long dark hair, a wig from Eliza's Halloween box, visible through the rear window, positioned just right on the headrest. He drove exactly the speed limit, stopped at 2 diners along Route 12, let people see the truck. Anyone tracking Melina's description would have 3 different sightings to chase. The real departure came last. Ferris drove an unmarked gray SUV. Borrowed from Matt, no connection to the club, registration clean and boring. Eliza sat in the passenger seat while Melina lay down in the back under a blanket, hidden from view. They slipped out through the rear access road, the one that dead-ended into farmland before connecting to a county highway barely marked on maps. For the first hour, nobody spoke. Ferris kept checking mirrors, taking random turns, doubling back twice to make sure they were clean. Only when they crossed into the next state did Eliza tell Melina she could sit up. The landscape had changed. Rolling hills gave way to flat farmland, cornfields stretching to the horizon, broken up by weathered barns and silos. Small towns appeared and disappeared, each one a handful of buildings clustered around a grain elevator or a church steeple. "How far?" Melina asked, her voice hoarse from not speaking. 6 more hours if we don't stop much," Ferris answered. "But we're taking the scenic route. Adds time, loses tails." Eliza turned in her seat. "You doing okay back there?" Melina nodded, though her hands were clenched tight in her lap. "Just thinking about Mom, about what happens after." "After is something we figure out when we get there," Eliza said. "Right now, we focus on getting you somewhere safe." Miles passed in comfortable silence, the landscape shifting from one frame to the next like a slow-motion film. Then Eliza started talking, her voice soft but steady. She told Melina about her own story, the marriage that started sweet and turned poisonous, the night she ran with nothing but her purse and the clothes on her back, the shelter that turned her away because they were full. She'd been sleeping in her car in a grocery store parking lot when Knox found her, brought her to the clubhouse, gave her space to breathe and heal. "The writers aren't saints," Eliza said. "Most of them have rap sheets and regrets. But they understand something most people don't, that sometimes the system fails, and when it does, you need people who'll step outside the rules to do what's right." "Why do they do it?" Melina asked. "Help people like me?" Ferris spoke up from the driver's seat. "Because we've all been left behind at some point. Different reasons, different stories, but the feeling's the same. Nobody showed up when we needed them. So now we show up for others." By mid-afternoon, they'd crossed into ranch country. Fences lined both sides of the road, horses and cattle dotting the pastures. The air smelled different here, clean, sharp with pine and grass. Ferris turned onto a gravel road that seemed to go on forever, kicking up dust behind them. Claire's ranch appeared gradually. First a mailbox, then a gate, then buildings emerging from a stand of cottonwood trees. The main house was low and sprawling, painted white with a wraparound porch. Behind it stood a massive barn, several smaller outbuildings, and a series of paddocks where horses grazed in the late afternoon sun. Claire herself came out to meet them, a tall woman in her 50s with sun-weathered skin and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a braid. She didn't ask questions, just pulled Melina into a brief, solid hug that smelled like hay and leather. "You must be exhausted," Claire said. "Let's get you settled." She led Melina to a small room in the house, simple but clean, with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a window overlooking the hills, and most importantly, a lock on the door that only worked from the inside. Claire handed Melina the key. "This is yours. Nobody comes in without permission. Not even me." That night, Melina ate dinner with Claire, Eliza, and Ferris. Pot roast and vegetables from the garden. Nothing fancy but filling. Afterward, she stood on the porch watching the sun set over the hills, painting everything gold and crimson. Somewhere far behind her, Connor and Knox were leading false trails into dead ends. Somewhere even farther, Rafe was building a case that might finally put Derek away. But here, in this quiet corner of nowhere, Melina felt something she hadn't felt in months. The possibility that tomorrow might be different, that maybe she could stop running and start living. She went to bed early, locked the door, and, since the night Derek stood at the foot of her bed, she finally slept without nightmares. The first week passed in a strange sort of limbo. Melina woke each morning to the sound of horses nickering in the pasture and Claire's boots on the porch steps. The routine was simple. Breakfast at 7, chores by 8, afternoons spent helping with the rescue horses. Claire didn't push conversation, just showed Melina what needed doing. Mucking stalls, checking water troughs, measuring feed. The work was physical and mindless in the best way, leaving no room for the thoughts that used to keep her awake. On day 9, Claire took Melina into town to enroll her in school. The building was small, probably a third the size of her old one, with a single hallway and classrooms that smelled like chalk and old wood. The principal, Mrs. Ortega, asked minimal questions when Claire presented the paperwork. Melina Henderson had become Melina Torres for now, just until things settled. A fresh start with a temporary name. The other students were curious but not cruel. A girl named Sophie shared her lunch that first day, asking about where Melina came from but accepting vague answers without pushing. By the end of week 2, Melina had found her rhythm. Sit in the back, do the work, don't draw attention. She wouldn't call it friendship yet, but the edges of loneliness had started to blur. The horses became her real companions. Claire ran a rescue operation for animals seized from neglect and abuse cases. She introduced her to the residents. Dancer, the bay mare whose ribs still pressed against her coat despite months of careful feeding. Ghost, who'd learned that hands could hit before they could comfort. Peanut, the shaggy survivor of a thunderstorm, still wary of ropes near his neck. They remember everything, Claire told Melina one afternoon as they brushed Dancer's coat. But they also learn that not every hand hurts. Not every voice yells. It takes time, but they figure it out. Melina ran the brush in long, gentle strokes. Do they ever stop being scared? They learn when to be scared and when to trust, Claire said, running her hand along Dancer's neck. Sounds simple, but it's the hardest thing to relearn. You don't erase what happened. You just learn to live around it. 3 weeks in, Eliza called. Melina's hands shook as she answered. He's arrested, Eliza said, her voice carrying relief and something harder underneath. Rafe got everything to the DA. Derek's ex-wife testified. They found the guns, proved he crossed state lines, documented every probation violation. He's looking at 5 years minimum, no bail. Melina sat down hard on the porch steps. 5 years. It's not forever, but it's time. Time for you to grow up, for your mom to get stronger, for things to change. And Melina? His cousin got suspended pending investigation. The whole department's under scrutiny now. He won't have inside help anymore. After they hung up, Melina walked out to the far pasture where the horses grazed in the afternoon light. She didn't cry or celebrate. She just stood there, letting the news settle into her bones. Derek was locked up. She could breathe. Mary finished her program 2 weeks later and transitioned into outpatient care. The visits started small, supervised video calls, then a single in-person meeting at a neutral location with a counselor present. Mary looked different. The fog had lifted from her eyes, replaced by something Melina barely remembered. Her mother, actually present. She'd found work at a diner, morning shifts that got her up early and kept her busy. The apartment above the hardware store was small but hers. Meetings happened 3 times a week, sometimes more when she needed them. I'm not asking you to come back yet, Mary said during their 3rd visit, reaching across the table to hold Melina's hand. I know I need to prove this is real, but I'm fighting for us, baby, every single day. I know, Mom. And Melina meant it. Autumn came quietly. Melina had been at the ranch long enough to notice the shift. Cooler mornings, earlier sunsets. Claire's cooking had filled out the hollow spaces in Melina's cheeks. Color returned to her face. In class, her hands started going up more often. She even agreed to go to a football game with Sophie. One Saturday morning, she helped Claire bring in a new rescue. A young mare named Willow who'd been confiscated from a hoarding situation. Willow was terrified, wild-eyed, refusing to be touched. Melina stood outside the stall, talking softly, not approaching, just being present. After an hour, Willow's breathing slowed. After 2, she took a step closer. By evening, she was eating hay from Melina's hand. You're good at this, Claire said, watching from the barn door. I get it, Melina replied. Being scared, not knowing who to trust. That night, Melina pulled out the postcard she'd been carrying in her pocket for weeks. It showed the ranch at sunset, hills rolling into purple distance. She wrote 4 words in careful handwriting. "I'm warm now. Thank you." She addressed it to the Black Hollow Riders, no return address, and mailed it the next day. Back at the clubhouse, when Knox pulled that postcard off the bulletin board and read it aloud, the room went quiet. Eliza smiled, Connor nodded, and Ferris raised his coffee mug in silent toast. They'd done it. They'd saved this one. Melina's old black hoodie still hung on the hook by the door, a reminder and a promise. They'd be ready when the next person showed up at dawn with nowhere else to go. Because that's what they did. They showed up. They always had. Not every hero wears a badge. Sometimes they wear leather and ride Harleys. Melina found her people when the world gave up on her. What would you have done in her place? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Embrace the Journey for more stories about resilience, courage, and the people who refuse to look away. See you in our next video.